For a certain generation of gamers, 2008's Dead Space was an unforgettable experience, a once-played, never-shaken onslaught of cosmic dread. Easily one of the most frightening video games ever made. Electronic Arts' space survival horror title built upon the successes of Resident Evil and Silent Hill to deliver an ordeal that for the first time made players actually feel like they were the prey sitting in front of their television. Just to quickly interrupt guys, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, it would honestly help me out. Thank you so much. Alright, let's get back into it. The original 2008 game is a modern classic that holds up exceedingly well by today's standards. There's very little that feels dated about its design, and the strategic dismemberment that forms the basis of its combat still offers a unique and gory thrill that's yet to be replicated. The remake's leap in graphical fidelity breathes new life into its stifling horror, but public discourse has centered on whether it really needs to exist in the first place. Some people might argue that the 2008 Dead Space still holds its own and the remake isn't really necessary. I strongly disagree with this, however, as in my opinion there are improvements here that not only modernize the game, it changed significantly how it is played, but also this remake provides additions that make this game feel overall as a much more superior experience compared to the original, and quite frankly sets up the Dead Space remake trilogy perfectly. These improvements begin with its story, which has been expanded via a number of alterations to both its characters and storytelling. The basic beats that make up the original game's narrative remains intact, starting with your fateful arrival on the USG Ishimura. After responding to a distress signal, you find a hulking Planet Cracker-class ship floating lifelessly above the planet of Aegis VII. Once on board, things take a familiar sharp turn downhill, but now once silent protagonist Isaac Clarke has been given a voice to react to the world appropriately. I'm generally not a fan of silent protagonists, although there's always a danger of vocal characters being overly chatty, especially in a horror game where atmosphere and tension are so delicate. Gunnar Wright does an exceptional job in giving Isaac a voice, making him feel more integrated into the story and events, rather than just being a vessel for the player to control.
Oh my god, Isaac, you made it.
They're everywhere. Chen, is he,
He's gone. Nothing I could do.
Much of the script has been rewritten to accommodate Isaac's speech, and the tale it weaves is still engaging. The Church of Unitology, a cultish religious sect that plays a significant role in the Dead Space universe, is much more prominent this time around, especially early on. Characters mention the infamous church in a way that feels natural, discussing the sect before they are aware of just how substantial its impact will be on future events. Kendra Daniels, one of Isaac's colleagues and your main point of contact throughout the game, has also been rewritten in a manner that elevates the remake. Previously she was prickly and leaned into some needlessly antagonistic behavior, but now she's been transformed into an empathetic character which pays off down the line in a more effective way than before. Structurally, the vast majority of the remake is identical to the original game, from the hectic dash to the elevator that follows the initial reveal of the zombie-like necromorphs, to the vital task of disabling all the Weezers that are poisoning the air on the hydroponics deck. There are a few small level design changes sprinkled throughout, however, along with some notable gameplay improvements. For starters, the zero gravity sequences now let you leap from the ground and use your suit's thrusters to freely move around each area, rather than rigidly hopping from one surface to another. Being able to essentially fly through these segments make them much more interesting than they were before, as you're forced to deal with enemies that can attack from any angle while orienting yourself to solve various puzzles. Weapons too have received a general touch-up to make them as viable as the mighty plasma cutter. New secondary fire modes provided with the additional options during combat, especially when facing off against larger crowds, while visual and audio feedback has been tweaked to make everything pop. The contact beam in particular now sports a devastating alternative fire that unleashes a single concentrated laser blast so powerful it practically melts anything unlucky enough to stand in its way, similarly to how the BFG operates in Doom. You no longer have to travel between sections of the Ishimura by tram either. Chapters start and end naturally as you explore, and most areas of the ship are now reached throughout cramped maintenance tunnels or via other methods, with the tram resigned as a fast way to backtrack if you so desire. Everything is just more cohesive. Isaac's experience is now a singular journey rather than a collection of fixed levels. It's also important how good the story is in Dead Space. One of the reasons I kept on playing the original long after it exceeded my comfort levels is because of the rich narrative that supports the gore. It would be unfair to spoil the outcome of Isaac's search for Nicole or the layers of lore that are revealed throughout audio logs and scrolled graffiti, but Dead Space's story is far more sophisticated and emotionally thought out than the genre would suggest. The remake's overhauled visuals are phenomenal across the board, bringing Ishimura's suffocatingly grim bowels to life with disgusting sheen. It's an iconic location for a reason, and the visual upgrade and sheer attention to detail contribute to it feeling more lived in than ever. The peeling system is one facet of the remake's improved graphical fidelity, and it has a delightful impact on each combat encounter. It ensures that the skin, fat, muscle layers are ripped off enemies with each successive wound, making the exposed bones vulnerable to snapping in half from a well-placed round or two. The green light running up the spine of Isaac's suit is a visual indicator of his health, and this makes the necromorph's own bodies a reminder of theirs. In many ways, Dead Space is a stunning example of how far games have progressed in terms of lighting, sound design, structure, and vocal capture. It also highlights how little the language of games, particularly third-person shooters, has changed over the last 15 years. The main difference between Dead Space and 2019's Resident Evil 2 remake is that the original Dead Space still feels like a modern game. The source material is playable, enjoyable, not as obvious a candidate for a modern refresh. Despite this, the Dead Space remake is brilliant, enhanced, upgraded, put together carefully by caring hands. Iron out those stuttering issues, and what you have here is one of the best action horror games I've ever played. It's impossible to expect the Dead Space remake to be as transformative as something like the Resident Evil 2 remake was. The generational leap isn't as grand, and so much about it feels inherently familiar to the 2008 original. The new side quests might leave a lot to be desired, but every other edition contributes to a remake that stays true to its progenitor while also improving upon it in almost every single way. Newcomers and hardcore Dead Space fans will get the most out of this experience, but this is now without a question the definitive way to play one of the best survival horror games ever. As far as remakes go, for me this is a very solid 9 out of 10. I say as far as remakes go because I judge this game as a remake rather than a new IP. If you did not like the original Dead Space, then this score might not be valid for you.